Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Downsized. My name is Christopher Durham. We are once again recording from the floor of Obesity Week in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you haven't watched any of these videos, Obesity Week is the premier conference and trade show where doctors, researchers, clinicians come together to present research and talk about the future of obesity. It's really not a patient-focused conference, honestly. It's about them talking to each other, pushing back, building better medicine, and discovering the future of obesity medicine. So our goal here is to bring some of those presenters to the table and ask them about what they're presenting and give you the perspective so that hopefully we can learn about what's coming next. All right, today I'm excited to welcome Michael. Michael, introduce yourself.
Great, yeah, thank you for having me again. I'm Michael Weintraub. I'm an endocrinologist and obesity medicine physician based in New York. I work at NYU. And I treat patients with obesity and other endocrine conditions as well.
So as you heard, Michael's a doctor. Here's the caveat. I'm not a doctor. Michael is not your doctor. So if you need help with your treating the disease of obesity or anything else, please talk to your local doctor to get the best care you can, right? Feel free to add.
Very true.
If you haven't already, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and we're going to jump in. So tell me about what you presented.
Sure. So I presented yesterday morning on the rate of GLP-1 persistence, meaning after someone was prescribed a medication like a GLP-1 receptor agonist, how long did they take it for? What proportion of patients discontinued treatment? Okay. And then what was the effect on weight change after treatment discontinuation?
So essentially, you started taking, how long did you stay on it? If you got off on it, what happened to your weight?
Exactly, yeah. So we took we were able to examine a large cohort of people. It was 1.2 million people in the United States. And we were able to link, it's kind of a unique data source. We were able to look at insurance claims data, as well as patients' electronic health record data. Of course, everything was de-identified.
The pie charts of the world and that
exactly,
kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the reason that's important is we wanted to know, if someone was actually filling the GLP-1 prescription. We know that, because of access issues, insurance coverage issues, it can be very challenging to know if I, as a physician, send a prescription over to the pharmacy, is it actually filled, or did insurance not pay for the medication and the patient wasn't able to actually take the medication?
So if you only use the insurance database, you'd only know people who filled it because of insurance. Mm-hmm. If you use the chart database, you'd actually see everybody else. So like I had 3 prescriptions before they were filled. Because we couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
Wasn't a choice. It was feed my children or lose weight.
Right, yeah.
Well, so tell me what you found.
So we found that 1 year out from that initial GLP-1 prescription, about 40% of people were still taking the medication. The remaining 60% of people discontinued the medication. And then we also then looked at, what was the weight change after discontinuation of the medication. And we saw that 60% of people had weight recurrence. They had weight regain after discontinuing the GLP-1 medication.
And were you able to track how much weight they were gaining?
Yeah, so we saw that. So just to give you a run-in, so when someone started on the GLP-1 medication, at the time that they stopped it, there was an average weight reduction of 10%.
Okay.
And then following stopping the medication, we saw progressive weight recurrence or regain in 3-month intervals. And so actually 12 months out after discontinuing the medication, there was a weight recurrence of 7.5%. So the vast majority of the weight was regained 12 months out from the
You were looking at, you said 1.5 million records?
Yeah, 1.2 million.
You were using AI or some other methodology to help you sort all of that?
A lot of epidemiologic research. Thankfully I had a lot of help from my co-authors to look into, to do the data crunching and the data analysis. And in the cohort of patients that we actually had the weight change, the actual weights that we needed to actually do this analysis was narrowed down to 18,000 patients.
It's still a good number.
Still a good number, and it's still the largest number of patients that did this type of analysis. So I think it's an accurate representation of, well, we know in the clinical trials what happens. We have two clinical trials with semaglutide as well as with tirzepatide that if someone stopped the medication in the clinical trial, they were switched to placebo, these patients regained the majority of the weight. But we haven't yet seen real world data on that. And we know that in the real world, it could be different than clinical trials. So that's why it was important to do this analysis.
Were you able to segment out the data and look at cohorts by BMI, by sex? Could you get more detail on it?
We did. And actually what we looked at primarily was stratifying or looking at by diabetes status.
Okay.
Sure. So whether someone had type 2 diabetes, whether someone didn't have type 2 diabetes, as well as on what was their initial BMI. And so what we saw is that those who had type 2 diabetes had higher persistence rates. They stayed on the medication longer than those without type 2 diabetes.
Yeah. Well, their doctors were a little more encouraging, probably.
Well, also insurance coverage is
coverage
a lot
more
better
there, for sure.
for those with type 2 diabetes.
Yeah. I don't know. It's one of those, that's almost an obesity stigma question as well, right? It's kind of, nobody worries about treating diabetes, but treating obesity. So it's always intriguing because our viewers, when you look at the numbers for tirzepatide and semaglutide, you see these big kind of averaged out numbers from the trials of 16%, 20% and all of that. And we in the real world see, I've lost 38% of my body weight. Dennis, who's a viewer here, has lost 55% of his body weight.
Yeah.
And then I talked to someone who lost 2%. So they're always like, how do I get to more data so I have a better idea of what's going on? And my statement is always, it doesn't really matter because you may not. We don't know how you're going to react to it.
Exactly. There is such a variability in response to these medications. And we as clinicians and even as researchers don't yet know before starting the medication who is going to respond well, who won't respond. And then when we start on the medicine, someone might lose 40% of their total body weight. Someone might not lose any weight. And it's not a failure of the person taking the medication. It is a failure of the drug. And so we look at what other medications
Say that again. Say that again right there.
So I think it's very important to recognize that if someone doesn't lose weight on a particular medication, it is not a failure of the patient. It's not the failure of the person. It's a failure of the medication. That medication did not work for that particular patient. And then we go back to the drawing board. We look at, well, what other options do we have to see what a patient will respond to.
And so basically right now you have what I call hammers, a big hammer and a little hammer, semaglutide, tirzepatide, and then a bunch of older stuff, the phentermines and the stuff that may or may not work for some folks. Surrounding us, and you guys can't see it, but there's Amgen and Boehringer Ingelheim and AstraZeneca and Lilly and Novo, all are developing drugs. So when you attend these other sessions, what are you excited about?
I am so excited with having more tools in our toolbox. To extend your analogy, which I probably would have used anyway, so it's perfect.
That's perfect.
Because right now these two medications they share partly the mechanism. They're both GLP-1 receptor agonists. Tirzepatide is a little bit different in the sense that they have a GIP, another kind of satiation or satiety hormone that it is able to affect, and so that might be why we see a greater degree of weight loss or less on average gastrointestinal side effects. But still, that is, a lot of my patients still do not respond well to these two particular medications, or they have gastrointestinal side effects. And so having so many other medications that work in slightly different ways, they might hit another satiation or satiety receptor that might preferentially benefit a certain type of person. And so that just gives me more options to work with my patients to figure out what is the right medication for that person.
So I sat through a couple and they were talking about phenotyping and genetic testing and some magical future where they may be able to say, there's 12 drugs and we'll do testing on you and figure out which works best for you. What do you think of all that?
So I had a great question. And I think the way that I think about this is in two different ways. One way is in that way, and the other is, what is our ultimate goal here? Our ultimate goal is, weight. The weight on the scale, it's a number on the scale.
Yeah, for sure.
And what really matters is our overall health. So our metabolic health, our physical health, and our mental health. And so those are the metrics that I'm following. And the reason I bring this up is, at that initial visit when I see the patient, I look at, what is their metabolic health and what's affected by that weight? Maybe they have high blood pressure or high cholesterol. Maybe they have metabolic liver disease. And in the not too distant future, we are going to have different medications with slightly different mechanisms that may preferentially benefit certain conditions. So somebody who has obesity and chronic kidney disease may benefit preferentially from one medication. Someone with obesity and high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease might benefit from another type of medication. Again, looking at overall health, because my goal is how can I prolong someone's health span and lifespan. And so that's why I'm targeting those metabolic health indicators.
I think it's exciting. So I sat through Lottie Knudsen's presentation. I don't know if you saw it. So one of the discoverers of GLP-1s from Nova, right? Fascinating lady from Denmark. She had one chart up on the screen that was, GLP-1 and basically 22 things around it that it impacted. And to her, obesity was just this one little thing in a corner. Honestly, she said the most important one was inflammation. But they could be, any given person, 2 or 3 of those could be more significant. I'm like, this is why I'm here, because we don't get that information as patients. All we know is, I weighed 286 pounds.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
It is. And I think once we shift the focus away from weight loss and just looking at the weight and more on health gain, that's really what matters. And so that's why I focus on those things at every visit. How are we improving your overall health? And how are we reducing your risk of developing cardiovascular disease and liver disease?
I mean, honestly, the reason that I started all these medications initially was because I woke up one morning and realized that my mother died 3 years older than I was at the time from cardiovascular problems from obesity, period. It was a direct line. I was like, I don't want to do this. This is not. So, I don't know. I started them and I was like, this isn't going to work. This is a scam. So I'm just going to flush $1,000 down the toilet. Stuff works. It's amazing. I mean, so talk to me about what comes out of this that you presented today. What's the next steps?
Yeah, I think ultimately we want to figure out why, we know that obesity is a chronic condition and it requires chronic treatment. And so it's rather disheartening when we look at the long-term rates of how long someone is taking the medication, and 1 year out, a fraction of the people are still taking the medication. And then we see weight recurrence. And so we'd like to know, what was the reason for the discontinuation? And how can we maximize the persistence of taking the medication such that someone can
Were you able to capture reason or no? It seems like that wouldn't be on
database.
My chart.
Yeah. So I mean, there have been patient surveys through other studies to look at that. The majority of reasons right now, not surprisingly, are access issues, insurance coverage issues, the cost of the medication. Supply issues was a problem in the not too distant future, or not too distant past.
Not long ago, for sure.
Not that long ago. Thankfully, it has been really resolved to a large extent. But then a lot of people have gastrointestinal side effects. A lot of people have decrease in energy level, or they just don't feel great, they tell me.
Yeah, that's the 2 reasons we hear anecdotes. First is price. I lost my job, I lost my insurance, I can't afford it, I'm done. There's nothing else I can do. The second is, I am throwing up. I have diarrhea.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not that large a number. If I were putting a percentage to it, it's probably not, 7% maybe.
Yeah.
It's not that high a number, but it's enough that you notice.
Yeah, and I think it depends on how much counseling the provider gives to the patient in terms of how to navigate the gastrointestinal side effects to prevent that from happening.
Could you see titration patterns in what you were doing? Was there any correlation between going off of and fast titration, for instance?
So not in this study, but
Right.
but anecdotally with my patients, certainly. There are other studies that looked at,
Right.
okay, if we abided by the every 4 weeks increasing
The standard Lilly Novo kind of.
versus a more flexible dosing titration, only going up if someone doesn't have any gastrointestinal side effects, only going up if someone weight has plateaued, and if they're still losing weight, we continue that same dose. Only going up if we medically, would benefit from additional weight loss. And by taking that slow and methodical route, we're able to increase the ability for a patient to tolerate the medicine and then thus have long-term success.
So in the GLP-1 community, there's a lot of belief that if I titrate slowly, I can extend the weight loss potential of the medication. Do you think that's true?
I don't have any data to answer that
That's
question.
a fair answer.
But my sense is it's more about the absolute dose. Because the way that we think about how these medications work is we have a body weight set point, and these medications lower that body weight set point. And depending on the dose, that's the extent of which that body weight set point is lowered. And then we lose weight until we reach that body weight set point,
Right.
and that's when our weight plateaus, when all that compensatory mechanisms of increasing appetite equal the impact of the medication. And so if we increase the dose, ultimately it's just lowering that. I think of it almost as a rubber band that we're stretching.
Well, I mean, for me, if you looked at, because I weigh every day, so I have lots and lots of data, right? I have 600 days worth of data. My first 3 months, I lost probably faster than I should, because I probably moved up too quickly. I just should have. I wasn't eating enough, honestly. So I think I lost 17 pounds the first month, 20 pounds the second. Yeah. But as I got up, it kind of did down, and leveled off to where after 70 weeks, I basically lost 1.3 pounds a week on average. People are like, well, that's slow. I'm like, no, it's not. It's kind of healthy. It's kind of fine. But yeah, we have a lot of that conversation, because particularly we see people that are 300, 400 pounds overweight, and they're deeply, deeply concerned that medications won't work long enough to get them to a healthy weight. I tell them, let's manage it for 6 months and a year, because a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, there'll be other options. You'll have other tools. There'll be more doctors like you.
which is wonderful. That there's been so much interest. I'm part of the. I helped write the obesity board exam.
I love that.
We had a record number of people who sat to take the board exam this year, which is amazing. So there is a lot of interest from providers, because now we have the tools. We've always wanted to help our patients, but now we actually have the tools to do it in an effective way.
So if you'd like to find an obesity certified doctor, if you go to our website, thedownsized.org, and click on resources tab, there's a link, and you can go to the website and search for a doctor. There's not as many as there should be, but there may be one in your area. If your doctor, not to say they're bad, but if you're not getting the care you need, please find somebody who can. Well, if they want to come see you, how can they do that?
Certainly. So if you live in the New York City area, I'm at New York University. I'd be happy to see. This is my clinical and research interest. So I'd be happy to help you on your journey.
Absolutely. All right. Any final words, big tips you'd like to give?
Well, I'd like to thank you for putting on this podcast, because I think it's so helpful to have that link from what clinicians are talking about and then researchers are talking about, and bringing that to patients and to people so that they know what's there.
Well, I mean, and I deeply appreciate that, because it's been interesting here, because obviously this is so scientific a space, right? Most of these people have never taken these medications. And I look at them, and they're all very well-intentioned, and no offense to anybody, but I'm like, you really don't understand what tirzepatide does to the brain. Stomach you get, because that's almost an easy thing, but up here, they need more patients here.
Yes, I 100% agree.
Well, thank you for joining me,
Of
Michael.
course,
We
thank you.
love the work you're doing, and we love it. When you get the next round, let us know.
Yes.
We'll have you on again.
I will.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this week's Downsized. Of course, we're live at Obesity Week. If you haven't already, please take a moment to like and subscribe. My name is Christopher Durham. This is Michael. We are the Downsized.